Everyone, welcome back to our weekly reflection for EDUC 3627, assignment 3. This week we're going to be talking about assessment. So just to start off, just a question for everyone. What kind of assessment did everyone engage with on their pracs?
So for the first two placements, I was doing visual art, and our assessments varied from Year 12 portfolios to just written pieces or written statements, and then actual paintings or artworks that we had to assess. Yeah, but nothing out of the ordinary for art. Yeah,
same with me. I had 2 Year 8 classes and 2 Year 11 classes for science. So there was, for the Year 8 classes, I was able to be a bit more creative with their assessment, and I was able to get them to use things like Minecraft to show their learning. Whereas for Year 11s, I had to do a SACE, science as a human endeavor task, which was kind of not as fun, but I'm pretty sure students just knew they had to do it. But
Yeah, I had similar experiences for sure with the younger high school years. There was definitely a bit more freedom with the assessment, whereas like any assessment I was involved with later years was directly derived from the SAFE.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, that I also had to do a sheet task with my Year 11 bio class. And then with my Year 10 science class, I just did a couple pre-assessments, formative assessments, and then they were going to do an exam, but I had left before they did that. So
yeah, with me, like I only did one placement, so I was teaching Year 7 students. So I was just giving them some mini tests, so using their software. So that's only I could do as summative. But formative questioning and fill in the blanks, tasks, things like that, I managed to get them done.
So just leading on with this, how important did you guys feel this assessment that you conducted in your classroom was?
I said at the pre-assessment I did for my Year 10 science class, so I was teaching a physics unit. So using pre-assessment to see where the current learning was at was really helpful, and like it really helped me in how I was pitching the content to the class, and to let me know like who I had to focus more on, and like who to use sometimes to kind of like see if the class was understanding, if I was explaining things well enough. I'd go to the students who were at like those lower levels, see if they're understanding that, but I would know that I was doing my job well. So I thought it was really useful.
Yeah, I definitely had a very similar experience with formative assessment and using that just as progress markers, and I think that that's a really, really helpful tool because it's very important to know where students are at with their learning to be able to teach them.
And also a quick way to know it, right? So because we don't have to wait till the end of the period, so as like an ongoing process, we can check their work pretty much every day. So
I also did like an exit cart assessment, I guess, at the end of my very first lesson with my Year 8s this year. And it was just asking questions like, what would you be interested in learning in for this unit? And unfortunately, I didn't get to use it in the end, but it was really, really helpful, like, because I could have taken the unit into different parts I didn't know students would be interested in. So that was really helpful, formative assessment there.
Yeah, I agree. Exit cards are quite helpful in like a range of things. You can ask questions, you can have like just opinions, or just see how students are going in multiple different ways. So the next question that there is that how can you help reduce your marking load? So I'll just throw out an idea. Well, I noticed what my mentors were doing, and I think is a really good idea in science, is if you have things like practice tests or mini tests, instead of taking all of those tests home and then spending time marking them when you can be doing other things, bring in either like an answers sheet, or go through it in class and have students mark it themselves or mark their peers, so that not only helps you reduce your marking time, but also helps students be reflective, and they can go through themselves and see, okay, this is what I got wrong, this is how I can fix it, rather than just saying, yep, that's a tick, or I got that right or got that wrong. like they're a bit more reflective about it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I really like that idea. Like I did that a lot when I was in school, and I really found that useful. I think one way as well is that so when I did my sheet task with my year 11 class is that instead of like taking all of their drafts home to draft them, I actually sat with them in class and I drafted them with them like in person. And so we went through and I put some like little track changes like on the actual work itself. And that way I did everything in class and nothing to take home with me, or maybe a couple to take home with me. I didn't get to, but it made it a lot easier. Made it so that like the students got the feedback like in person. There was no like questioning like what I was writing down because they understood everything that I was explaining to them. So
Yeah, definitely. I think for a lot of like progress markers and practice tests, there's definitely a lot of programs out there as well that do the marking for you. Like for example, with maths, there's like Khan Academy and Maths Online and stuff, and they can be really good ways to like send kids home and either get them to do it as homework or get them to do it in class and still check their progress, but without having to go through and mark everything yourself.
I agree with that, Miles, because when I was doing my placement, they were using that Maths Pathway program. So for the test, they actually do half of the test online. So they only do half of the test paper-based. So when it comes to marking, they have like 5 questions or so to mark. So the remaining is marked by the computer. So it makes the job really easy.
Are you going to be an advocate for NAPLAN, and how might you broach this issue with concerned parents?
I think from what I learned in the presentation this week that the two girls did, I wouldn't advocate for how NAPLAN is currently, but I would advocate for an improvement of NAPLAN. And when it comes to parents, I guess just explain the situation to them, because generally they would be understanding, right? If you just explain, well, this is a compulsory test for.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to be, I don't know whether my view is same as yours, but I like to advocate it if we are actually changing the structure of it. For example, the purpose of NAPLAN, if you can keep it like a performance measurement for the student, so instead of just a comparison between schools or that kind of political stuff, so if you don't have that, I think it's a good thing because sometimes we have to push students a little bit. For example, instead of giving really easy maths questions, we had to actually give them harder ones to really get them thinking or maybe to train them thinking. So sometimes we have to do that little bit of a push to actually help them succeed because they don't know what they are capable of. But so if we can have a different purpose for the NAPLAN, I think it's kind of a good way to measure their performance.
I agree with Uplift in the fact that if NAPLAN was used for different reasons and not for schools applying for funding or, you know, ways which kind of defeats the purpose of NAPLAN, I think it would be a better off way of finding out where students are sitting in different schools and just finding out where support is needed, and maybe changing the fact that schools that aren't performing so well should be getting funding rather than the ones that are doing well. Maybe the structure of that. NAPLAN itself, I don't think is bad. I just think it's what comes out of NAPLAN and how it's structured in schools isn't very efficient, doesn't really serve a purpose.
I suppose that I probably wouldn't be a massive advocate for it, but when dealing with like parents and students as well, you know, I'll take the approach of not being too negative about it because it's something that I have to do. I don't want them, going in like with these like horrible thoughts about it and like hating their experience. Even though like probably like not the most supportive of it, I still feel like there's not any use being against it, to the students and to parents when it's a compulsory thing that they have to do.
Okay.
And so I suppose just informing them, telling them why we do it, and everything like that is probably a good way to do it.
I think one part of the discussion with parents should also be something just explaining to them that it's just to test how students are going in numeracy and literacy. And I think it's very big. I don't know about everything, but I know with certain groups of parents or certain parents that come from certain ethnic backgrounds, they have very high expectations of kids. So I think making that clear that these scores of NAPLANs don't go to their grades can probably put the pressure off some students as well. Then we can move on to the next question, which is it true that assessment is just as important as running the lesson itself?
I would say that I don't think it's as important because you could still teach the content really well without necessarily assessing it. But they do kind of have to go hand in hand. You can't really not have assessment. But yeah, I guess like quality assessment is still really important, but I think it is more important to actually teach the content well in the first place.
You can't really give students just assessment without actually teaching them content. So
Yeah.
I do agree with that one. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you gave really good assessment tasks but really bad delivery of content, it's not really going to help the kids.
Yeah, like I think we can all speak for ourselves that like we can learn without having assessment. It's possible. We can learn how to cook without being assessed on it or something. But in terms of the school system that we're in, if we don't have assessment, then yeah, we can't, I guess, show our students or their parents or even ourselves whether any progress is actually being made. And then yeah, of course, like we're required by SACE or whatever ACARA to provide results. And so in that aspect, assessment is important. Otherwise, we might get fired from our jobs if we didn't give assessment. But I guess from an educational point of view, yeah, I wouldn't say assessment is the core, like the most important part of learning.
Assessment for the sake of assessment isn't very useful.
That's right.
Like just giving out tests because that's the only way is easy for you is probably not the best way to teach. But if you're doing assessment to actually just see where students are so that you can then change your unit plan or something in the future is probably a good use of assessment. So I guess it's just how you're using the assessment.
Yeah.
Right. So the next question is that should we focus more on a student's performance and what assessment tasks should facilitate this, and is this needed?
I feel like it should be more student well-being. For example, like I met a student the other day, like year 8 student. So he was trying to write down a poem to explain the way the heart works. So he's actually trying to explain the process of the heart using a racing car or something. So, but anyway, so instead of explaining it in a paragraph, he's actually trying to come up with a different idea. Maybe he's comfortable explaining that way. So I think performance-wise, we might not accept it, but for the sake of his well-being, he's actually enjoying it. So
I think with specifically student performance, if we're talking strictly grades, they don't reflect a student's progress in their learning. So I think that's not something I would want to focus on, especially seeing how much more students are getting worried about things like grades and stuff, which is understandable because of competition into getting into uni courses and things like that, speaking about secondary. But I think it should be valued, like student progress should be valued rather than just performance.
Just elaborating on what Upalitha was saying as well about focusing on student well-being, I have personally noticed, like from people that I know or students that I've worked with, like kind of a trend of if teachers don't focus on student well-being and just focus on performance, they can sometimes really put like some students off that subject, because if that student feels like they're really bad at that subject and they're not getting any enjoyment out of engaging in that subject, then it's easy for them to kind of develop like a bad idea of what that subject is and then not want to pursue it further in future. And even if like they were never going to get the best grades in that subject, like they could still really enjoy doing it and they could still actually learn to like it later, provided they actually like find some joy in the subject.
And sometimes students really enjoy subjects that they don't do well in, so they can't pursue it further. Like I know with a lot of schools, if you don't do well in science in year 10, you can't pursue it in year 11 and then in year 12 as well. So it kind of really limits students in doing things they enjoy rather than what they do good in. The last couple of questions are that should assessments reflect more tasks that students will encounter in the future or outside of school? And have you seen any working examples of this, and how might you achieve this yourself? So I'll start with that. I do think assessments should reflect something students will encounter in the future and the outside world, except for school, because it will actually show them context. It will probably also motivate them more to work harder in something. I know a lot of students love to ask, where will I use this in the future? So maybe by creating assessments which have links to the real world and shows them how they'll apply this in the real world will actually probably motivate them or engage them more in the task or assessment.
When I was in placement, I was lucky that like for 2 of my classes I actually got to do this. So for my year 10 class we did so it was a physics unit, but we're looking at road science. So for the actual physics we were looking at like speed, velocity, things like that. But then when my practical task I did with them, we simulated them driving and being distracted, and how being distracted reflects their reaction times and how fast they can like press the brakes. And that was the year 10 class of the guys who were turning 16 this year and getting their license. And so I thought that was really useful. And they really enjoyed that. And like they love talking about like, driving and things like that. So that was cool. And then with my year 11 bio class, we looking at infectious diseases, which was great for this year with coronavirus. And so we looked at how much bacteria was on their phones and laptops, and like we simulated how disease spreads and things like that. And so like lots of like nice like real world context then. So they really like that.
I think that's such a great example actually. Like those are things that students can really get passionate about, and like also things like environmental issues and other areas like that. I think you can implement, like you were talking about with being distracted whilst driving, like you can implement really important lessons that if you were just trying to explain that concept, like a lot of kids might disengage, but by doing it in a way that's engaging and relevant, like you can really kind of teach your content and also like a good message behind it.
Yeah, when they were doing it, they were surprised. Or when I was on my phone, it took me so much longer to press the brakes, and so I had that like nice conversation with them about not doing that in real life. So yeah, it was really good.
Danny, did you have an example you were talking about?
So, I didn't get to teach this, but one of my mentor teachers, what they do every year to get students excited about their design class is that they have a competition every year where, one of the design students has to create a magazine cover for the school. So, it's not just like showing how your work can be used in the real world, but they have an incentive and they get to see the actual product at the end. Like it literally does have a relevance in their school community, in their world.
I was working with one of the previous teachers to develop lesson plan using ICT. The task was to find the height of a tree or find the width of a tree using everyday items. So when I was doing that lesson plan, the research teacher that was working with me, he got really excited because he said when he was studying mathematics, he hated trigonometry, and he had no idea how actually it can be done in a different way, like using ICT or any other way. So I think if you can actually do real life examples, or if you can use ICT or any other different form, we can actually do it so that actually that way student can enjoy it, or maybe it makes our teaching easier.
Yeah, that's a really good example, I think, because something like if you're teaching really abstract concepts like say trigonometry, where it's like, like sine and cosine and all of those things, and how to find one side in relation to the other side. Like they're very abstract concepts that don't really make that much real world sense unless you can kind of show students like something like that actually brings it back and shows how it could be useful in real life.
And that just helps with them being able to understand the learning as well. It's not just to engage them, but to actually help them understand.
Yeah, like not just learning formulas for the sake of learning formulas.
Thank you everyone for your contribution to this week's reflection, and thanks for watching.